morning. It's Mark Bossert here, producer of the Pawlik Automotive podcast. And we're here this morning with Bernie Pawlik, Pawlik Automotive in Vancouver, and we're talking cars. How are you doing this morning, Bernie?
Doing very well.
So welcome back to beautiful Vancouver. You've been in Europe. How was it over there?
That was amazing. It was hot. And, in the world of cars, there's quite a variety, but obviously being in Europe, lots of European cars. Lots of fancy ones too. Northern Europe, they have nicer cars than around Italy and Greece area. So been there once before. So anyways, just speaking from terms of cars, it's always interesting to look and see what's around. And I actually got to St. Petersburg and I was looking around for a lot of old Russian trashy cars, and there actually surprisingly weren't very many of them. I saw a few old Ladas and a couple rusty things here and there, but for the most part, their fleet of cars is actually in pretty good shape all around Europe. They're pretty nice cars.
So today we're going to be talking about a 2013 Mercedes R350, obviously a European sourced vehicle that had an air suspension compressor. What was going on with the suspension in this vehicle?
So this vehicle was brought to our shop actually not for a suspension problem. Well, not an air suspension problem. We'd done a service a few months ago, and we'd identified that some control arm bushings were worn out. So the owner brought the vehicle in. We replaced the control arm bushings, did the job. Everything was great. The next morning he comes to pick the car up, and the car's sitting very low. Figured maybe we'd done something wrong during the service. Looked it over, and then basically what had happened is the air suspension compressor had just packed it in at some point while we had the vehicle in our shop. So they tend to die from time to time like that.
Okay, tell us about the suspension system in this vehicle.
So it's air suspension. So it relies, of course, on compressed air to keep the vehicle up. The great thing about the system is you can adjust it, so you can raise and lower the height of the vehicle. Obviously, when you're driving down the highway and just regular driving, you want it low for stability. But if you need some off-road clearance, it's snowing, or you go on a rougher type of road with potholes and things, you can raise the height of the vehicle. There's also a couple of different modes for the suspension on this vehicle. You can adjust it for sport driving. You can have a more comfort drive or an automatic drive, which will kind of just take it in between the two modes depending on what you want.
So why would the compressor just die? This vehicle isn't that old.
Compressors seem to be one of the items that tend to die on a lot of air suspension vehicles, probably the most common failure component. And we do a lot of them on Range Rovers. They tend to die. Interestingly enough, in having this vehicle, diagnosing it, came across a technical service bulletin from Mercedes recommending replacement of these compressors if they have a certain model year. So I'm thinking this campaign probably started when these vehicles were under warranty, but of course this vehicle is out of the warranty period, and it costs to replace. But I think why the compressor died in this vehicle, I think they just didn't make it good enough for the vehicle. And there's a revised and upgraded version.
Do you have some pictures?
I do. Let's have a look. R350 station wagon style vehicle, all-wheel drive. This is a gasoline powered vehicle. They do come in diesel as well, but this is the gas model. Not that it looks any different from the outside. And then we can get to the compressor. So there's the compressor, the old failed unit. I mean, not a lot to see. I mean, there's a motor in this unit, and then there's also a storage tank. And from the storage tank, it distributes the air to a valve unit. Then that'll allow the vehicle to go up and down. So besides being a compressor, this also has some valving in it that will allow the vehicle to raise and lower depending on what the computers command. Not much to see with this thing. It's basically just the outside of the unit. So that's our pictures.
So this is more complex than conventional suspension. Is that the main common failure part, the compressor?
We seem to do more compressors, as I mentioned earlier, than any other components. But certainly the other major components that will fail on an air suspension system are the actual shocks or struts themselves, or the air springs. And given time, I mean, probably 10 years plus on any vehicle, your air springs or struts are going to wear out and start leaking. And it really depends on the mileage, the usage, where the car's been. I mean, sometimes you might get 20 years out of them, but at some point you will need to replace them. And that's the other major expense item on the vehicle. Of course, there's lines and pipes and hoses and valves and a computer. So potentially everything can go wrong, but a lot of vehicles, things don't. Some cars, the struts will wear out, the compressor will never wear out. Other vehicles, the struts last almost forever, and compressors wear out. But you can always be prepared with this kind of thing, that anything and everything can and will go wrong.
So can air suspension be eliminated if the owner doesn't really want to incur the high repair costs?
Yes, they can. On most cars, most vehicles are made with, air suspension as an option. I can't think, I mean, I'm not certain on this vehicle whether it's an option or not. It probably is. I know certainly for a lot of Range Rovers and Land Rovers, there are kits available where you can just eliminate the air suspension. A lot of other vehicles, American, like Lincolns, there's kits available. I used to own a Subaru that had air suspension. It was fantastic, but of course, when you get an old Subaru, it's not worth a lot of money. A lot of customers we had just would eliminate it with a kit where you just put in the conventional suspension. Of course,
yeah, I had a Lincoln that had the compressor failed too.
Yeah. It's expensive to fix, but I love air suspension for a couple of reasons. First, no matter what kind of load you put in the vehicle, you put 5 people and, 400 pounds worth of suitcases in the back, and the car doesn't sit like this. It just sits nice and level. Most air suspension systems offer ride height adjustments, which is, again, an advantage. You get a nice, smooth, low riding vehicle, and then you can raise it up for off-road or snowy conditions. So that again is an advantage, but it comes at a price. And often when a car gets old, you don't want to necessarily spend $5,000 or $10,000 on, compressors and struts and things like that. So there are options available.
So back to the R350, it's a pretty unique vehicle. How is it for reliability?
I'd say it's fair. It's a unique shaped vehicle for Mercedes. It's kind of like to me, it's more like a conventional large station wagon, as opposed to an SUV or a sedan. But, a lot of the components in this vehicle are shared among different models. I mean, the engines are, shared between different models. You've got the Blue Tech diesel, which we've spoken a lot about. If you want an engine that's really reliable, I probably wouldn't recommend that for long term, but it's good on fuel. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty good vehicle. I mean, same as any other Mercedes. I mean, they're more complicated, so things go wrong, like this air suspension compressor. But it's a nice vehicle, and you just expect to pay a little more to repair it than a Japanese car.
So there you go. If you're looking for service for your vehicle in Vancouver, the guys to call are Pawlik Automotive. You can reach them at 604-327-7112. You have to call ahead to book because they're busy. Even with Bernie having been on holidays, they were still busy the whole time. Or you can check out our website, pawlikautomotive.com, or hopefully you're enjoying us on YouTube or our new podcast. Thanks, Bernie.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for watching.